And we go ahead and start the recording. I'll hear the noise if anybody else is joining here. So let me switch over here. But before I do that, let me ask you guys. So were either of you at Red Hat Summit or Cisco Live by any chance?
I was at Summit.
Oh, okay. Um, good. So um, are you at Red Hat or are you a customer?
Distributor for Red
Okay.
Hat.
Okay. Were you there like participating in sessions and stuff or attending the sessions?
Yes, I did. I tried to attend as many of the EDA sessions as I could.
Oh, sweet. Okay. Yeah, we'll talk about EDA a little bit today. But nobody went to Cisco Live, so that'll be a part of it as well. So just let me know if I'm missing anything that you saw that you thought was interesting as we go through it. I'll start with the Red Hat stuff. So two the two big things are what was interesting to me, and I didn't go to Summit. I just only saw the events on the virtual replays, and some of that was because it was such a close um, in scheduling, it was so close to Cisco Live. So I went ahead and went to Cisco Live instead to help the BU with a lot of the stuff that they were doing out there. But the two things that caught my attention the most was, certainly the AI stuff. So Ansible Lightspeed and, a lot of cool things that are coming down the pike for that. So we're almost in Ansible 2.4 version. So that'll be the first like release that would be like a tech preview of Ansible Lightspeed. So Lightspeed used to be called Wisdom. So you guys may have seen some of that out there prior to the summit, and now it's Ansible Lightspeed. But under the hood, it's using IBM Watson, mainly the code assistant part of it. So there's a broader use case around just Red Hat in general. So there's all this activity that's that's meant to focus on innovation around AI for OpenShift and you know that component of it. So I guess like two different work streams. The one that I'm interested in because it's Ansible is for the code assistant part of it. So basically, what that is and what it does is it's you know, more or less like a chat GPT. So with this, these large language models that go out like chat GPT and have access to code examples on the internet, oftentimes if you're using it to build Python scripts or playbooks, sometimes there's issues with, the way that it's constructing them, in so much as they may work, but it might not be considered like the best practice way of, configuring whatever the use case is, the intended use case. So with Lightspeed, it only has access to the validated content and examples. So it's more of an internal viewpoint that would be more prescriptive. So with that being said, your playbook examples, if you tell it like create me a playbook that does these things and give it your requirements, then it should return to you the result that would be considered like the best practice, right? And then whatever that particular use case is, then that would be like a supported work stream that if it didn't work for whatever reason, it would be something that would be covered under the support contract. So again, you're not working kind of in a vacuum where ChatGPT offers some suggestions or creates the entire playbook for you, and it doesn't work, and you're kind of left working through like Galaxy and GitHub repos to interact with contributors over logging issues and that kind of stuff. So it just keeps you in that those guardrails of what's supported and those types of things. So I think this will help add value to customers and allow them to have consistent results when using AI. So I think that'll be, that's a new emerging, feature that's going to add a lot of value. So this is just some of the things that have already happened. And what I was talking about with Ansible 2.4 is the tech preview launch for Lightspeed. So it's being introduced into Ansible, but it's a tech preview. So it'll be a part of the Ansible 2.4 release, which was similar to EDA, where EDA in 2.3 release was a tech preview, and now it's like the first GA release of the event-driven Ansible for 2.4, which is the next topic. So the second interesting thing or interesting topic at the Red Hat Summit is the event-driven Ansible. So just a quick overview of what that is. So with event-driven Ansible, it's really I guess two main components of it that that typically you would deal with, like in terms of configuring the events, but also how can you ingest data from particular sources. So on the front end, there's a whole list of sources that I'll share on the next slide, but kind of where the community is contributing and the ecosystem of other vendors that provide other content outside of EDA, but now with EDA being very interesting way of contributing and moving forward. There's these source plugins. So if a particular vendor solution, if they have the ability to create a source plugin, then the EDA can effectively listen to that source plugin. So that gives it the ability to ingest data. Like the data is really key there. And if like whatever the target of the automation is, if it's a source of an EDA and you want to create a trigger from that, if it doesn't have a source plugin directly, then there's other source plugins that will allow you to receive data from whatever that device is. So with like networking devices, they have telemetry, right? So if the device can send gRPC or GMNI telemetry, then if you have a collector that understands those protobuf formatting of that data, then it can receive that data. But Ansible is not able to receive it in that in that native format. So it has to be converted into a structured data that Ansible can deal with. So EDA needs like JSON data as an example. So that's where Kafka is really useful, because a lot of these devices that are the source of the data, if they don't have like their own source plugin, then if it can be integrated into a Kafka message broker, then that JSON data can become a topic, and then EDA can listen to those topics. So there's sources directly from vendors, and it's in very liquid because there's many, or fluid because many of them are currently working on plugins. So there's a various roadmap of what's available soon from different vendors. And then again, don't worry if your particular source is not on there, because if you can collect the data and have it available for a Kafka message broker, then that's one way. Another one that's kind of ubiquitous across a lot of the GUI operations tools is webhooks. So if the particular management software of some sort has a webhook, then EDA can receive webhooks. So once you have these sources of data and EDA can receive that data, then that's where you start to create the rules. So there's this whole notion of a rule book, and a rule book is akin to a playbook. But in a rule book, you would define what the source is, and normally the source requires you to have what plugin you're going to use identified, like Kafka as an example, and also what ports you would listen to. So that data you would listen on a particular port, and depending on the source plugin, then it would be a different port that you would tune into, if you will. And then that data, through a rule book, you can create conditions, and the conditions is where you decide what the trigger is. So whatever happens based off a condition of the data received and other variables, then ultimately that culminates into an action. So the action can be things like running a playbook locally where the EDA server is running, or it could be triggering a job template in the Ansible controller, or a workflow template, or it could be a notification. So, there's several different ways that you can act or react, based off of these rules. And then that could either be something that's more passive, like a notification, or it could be an actual, remediation to automatically reconfigure the device or whatever the case may be. So there's all sorts of cool feedback loops and remediations that can be provided, from these actions. So having said that, on the content side of things, and if you've been following what we've done recently with certified content, many vendors have already started to participate with certified collections. And a collection can contain modules, right? Because that's how we receive our modules now. Um, but it also includes roles, and roles are very specific use cases that are mapped to a use case. So effectively, those are purpose-built playbooks, and then those can be used or repurposed. Let me hop in here and let that person in. Did I wait too long? I hope I hit. Here we go. Join. Okay, cool. I didn't know if it hit accept or not. Sorry about that. Hello, D. So basically, in those collections, they typically, contain modules, but also roles. So now what's happening is a lot of these vendors in our ecosystem are developing roles that are specific to EDA. So it's some use case around, using EDA, so that way it's easier for you to consume them. So it's just like how playbooks are. The playbook in a role has already been constructed for you, and then you're really just calling it from like the playbook that you're front ending, your automation. So if you're using AAP or using the command line, that playbook will, either install or import, or allow you to point to whatever role that you actually want to run, in the path to that role. So now it could be something related to EDA that could be used with the rule books. So it's kind of the same notion. So these roles are accessible. Now we have that like additional layer of creating curated content, right? So if you look at like a collection, it could have roles, and roles are mapped to those use cases. But we have validated content now. And this is where some folks get kind of confused where, okay, what's the difference between the certified content? So certified content is around the modules, and it may have some, or usually does have some example roles. The validated content would take those roles that are available in collections, and it provides like another layer of abstraction on top of those roles. So you can kind of think of it as a way of like stitching together roles that did like different use cases, but now it's like kind of like a larger use case that's using multiple roles. And that's what the validated content is. So a couple of the vendors, it shows that that they have both a collection and certified content. I mean, certified and validated content. So they're working kind of in two different work streams. So they have the collection, and they're going to have a validated content sitting on top of that. So so there's that. And then on the right hand side, you have the plugins. So these are the source plugins that we were talking about. Kafka again is kind of like that catch-all that works with most things, and then webhooks. So those two give you the ability to pretty much create an EDA use case around just about anything that can send data. The other ones would be more specific to that source talking directly to EDA. So like with the public cloud providers and some of these other, niche types of operational tools like Watchdog and things like that will be able to talk directly to EDA, and like Prometheus, and most of it's around operational tools talking directly to, or integrate more integration directly into EDA. So that's kind of what's going on in that second work stream. And then another thing to note too, like I mentioned earlier, that 2.4 will be released soon, and that provides us with the first GA of EDA. And everything that I've shown, because I've shown a couple demos with EDA, it's all been based off of the EDA server, the command line server installed and like running on Linux. In the GA release, there'll be a notion of like an execution environment, how it's a container. So that sits, underneath the controller, or if you're using like the Ansible Navigator tool, and it gives you the ability to have container that already has collections installed, so that way it can be more consistent. You can use the same version control, these execution environment containers, and then use them across all of your controllers, or if people are working from laptops, they're all using the exact same container. So in that same light, there's a decision environment. So those would be like an but it's like containerizing for the rulebook engine. So it runs in a consistent way, and it would have all those like roles that are already brought, or have already been installed from the collections and available to use with EDA already packaged in them. So that's how it'll look in this new environment. But it would require, at least initially, it requires the EDA. So now it's called the EDA controller. It would have a GUI. And the GUI looks a lot like the automation controller, but you would install this on like a separate virtual machine, which is similar to the way like we provide the private automation hub. And then that would give you the capabilities to use a GUI, or you could still use the command line, right? Kind of like same thing with running automation. Either way, but you would have now a GUI as well. So that's the this first iteration. But over time, and the plan is like in 2.5, it would move more into like a unified controller. So EDA would just be a part of the automation controller, and you would just see those capabilities like merged into the UI. So that way it's one less component to install. It would just be a part of where you're already configuring the automation. You would also configure the EDA components of that as well. So that's just that's like the roadmap through this first release, and then what it'll look like moving onward. So those were kind of like the two main things. Then the third one wasn't as important. Where did it go? I kind of moved these slides around. The third part, and I'll go back to these, is called the cloud automation, and most of that is around like how you can deploy your Ansible controllers. So the most mainstream way, or most common way, is on Linux, and that could be on bare metal or on VMs. But you can also install your Ansible controller and other components on OpenShift, and some of the newer deployment options are public cloud. So you have Azure, which is a fully managed deployment of the automation controller in that cloud. And then Google Cloud is on the marketplace. So that provides you a way of like having access to the cloud licensing and all that stuff, but you still have to build out the controller, which is the same way with AWS. So like you consume it on the marketplace, but then you have to spin up those components and install them, and then you would be like self managing your controller. But instead of like having to install it directly off of real instances, it does provide you like everything that you need, and also the templating of that. So it makes it easier to orchestrate building it, but then ultimately you're managing it. Where Azure, it's actually managing the service for you. So like if for some reason it the controller crashes or whatever, then that's a part of the Azure managed service to help you in more of like a curated way or managed way. So what got messed up here is the catalog, right? So those are the three things that I was interested in Summit, and I was able to find those through the session catalog, and it gives you access to all the video replays. So if you go to this QR code, or if you click this link, and as always, I make these slides available afterwards. So if you go back to this event, it will convert into a past event, and you'll see the links in there on the meetup page. Or you can just scan this thing right now, this barcode, and you'll be able to create a bookmark, for that. But this is free. I think you'll have to have like a like it'll require you like to log in if you haven't logged in with us before, but you'll be able to access it for free, and it'll be all the same breakout sessions that were at the actual live event. And again, you can go back to this later. And for the folks that are watching this as a recording, you'll be able to do the same thing. This will remain available. I think like all these sessions, at a minimum, they'll be out there for a year. So in terms of a session that was interesting for us in our meetup in particular, since we're focused on network automation, there's this Ansible session, and it's from our BU, and it's focused entirely on network automation. So like if you go into here, and I may or may not, well, I'm still logged in. So this is what it looks like when you go into this catalog, and you'll be able to watch it. And it has Sean Cavanaugh from the BU and also Daphne Mendoza. So they'll just go in to a lot of details, basically stuff that we talk about, right? So using facts and things like that. So it's good foundational training for network automation in Ansible. So there's that, and yeah, so some of this stuff, maybe I meant to hide some of these slides or whatever, but that's not relevant. Yeah, so here we go. So we'll go ahead and we'll switch gears to Cisco Live. Unless anybody has any questions about Red Hat Summit or something that you may have seen if you attended that you'd like to talk about before we move on. I'll just pause for a second here. Okay, so it sounds like, or it looks like everyone's okay, so we can go ahead and move forward. So here's the Cisco Live stuff. So this just happened, right? So it was June 4th through June 8th was the event. And this is just some personal pics. I have way more pictures than this, but it was getting too cluttered trying to create this collage on this slide. But this was the Red Hat booth. And we had a mini theater, which a lot of the larger booths that had, sponsors at a certain level had like their own little theater area. So we had ongoing sessions. And then on the outer perimeter, we had our demos. So there's like these screens on the outside. And here's me working one of those over here. So I was giving my own demos, and people would walk up and ask questions or talk about, whatever they happen to be working on in their careabouts. So I had a lot of interesting discussions and learned a lot from customers, just things that they're automating. And most of it was around, Cisco topics, since this was Cisco Live. But a lot of good conversations. And then I gave a couple of sessions. So I did an event-driven Ansible for networking. And I also did a network compliance with tips and tricks on how to automate compliance and do various checks and auto remediations and things like that. So I provided that in this little theater area a couple of times during the event. For the this was the demo area here where I was giving demo. You can't really see it; it's kind of blurry. But I had various demos that people could walk up, and I would talk through it and whatnot. I took some pictures of the hardware, the Cisco hardware infrastructure that they use for Cisco Live. And before Red Hat, I worked for Cisco, and it always was interesting to me, like how quick they can stand up what's needed for this, large event. And a lot of it is automated. And that automation includes Python, but also a lot of Ansible as well. And when they show like Cisco IT types of different examples of them, they use a lot of Ansible as well. So for this event, they have to bring it up. They have so many hours like on the Friday or whatever before the event, and they pretty much have to spin all of it up, in one day. So there's tons of automation, and it's just kind of cool to see the gear. So you really can't see like all the gear. I think there was like about 10 racks of switches and Wi-Fi controllers and firewalls and all that good stuff. But the cool thing is just like how quick they can spin it up, tear it down, and provide connectivity for all these various sessions and lab pods and the like. So that is always like a good example of using automation in real life to solve challenges like this, especially these large events. we had a CCIE event at Topgolf. So that's me. And you don't see me swinging and missing a couple of times too in the beginning because I hadn't really done that in a while. But it was fun. That thing for the CCIE was pretty crowded this time, and a lot of people, mainly because it was Topgolf, a lot of people showed up. So that was a good time. And they had, you can't really see down here, but they had this weird kaleidoscope picture thing that was kind of freaky. So I did that, and then this was before the over here. This picture with the lighted hat was the concert they had, and this was before it started with Gwen Stefani and Blake Shelton. So that was pretty cool. So I had a lot of fun, and I learned a lot. So the things that I picked up on, right? So what's more important is not me having fun, but like the two big things that I noticed across the world of solutions and just various sessions that they had, and from talking to a lot of folks out there, the two big things that relate to Ansible and automation was ThousandEyes. So ThousandEyes is an acquisition that Cisco made like 2 years ago, or almost 2 years ago, and it's all around network observability. And there's this whole notion of full stack observability, but I'm more, again, more locked into the network side of it. So ThousandEyes, it's all about the network observability. So it's network assurance, it's all the telemetry that you can glean, and what it does is it's mainly around agents that run on endpoints, and it's collecting data that gives you really good insights into the customer experience or the end user experience. So it provides all this real-time graphing and analytics around performance, and in terms of the network infrastructure, and it has viewpoints like outside of your infrastructure. So you can see what it looks like in public cloud and across the internet and all that stuff. So it's collecting all these great insights and summarizing everything from like a dashboard perspective, and being able to search particular data and trends and all that stuff. So what's interesting to me is that's not really automation, but that's great data to have access to, especially for EDA. So as things start to trend or degrade and that type of thing, that's what this whole system is focused on. And the way that it can share and communicate is through webhooks. Currently, right? So webhooks is kind of like, hey, you can use EDA with this particular operational software right away, but under the hood, or kind of behind the scenes rather, there's an initiative for a plugin, right? So they're working on a plugin for our EDA, so it'll make it like more more integrated. But for now, like, it's webhooks. So with the webhook, you can pass data, so there's a little bit more work because you need to configure the webhook based off of what data you want to pass back to EDA. But there's a lot of good data. So in that particular context, there's a lot that we can learn from ThousandEyes to create triggers, right? So the triggers in terms of like the conditions in the rule books, and then having actions, right? Because ThousandEyes doesn't do automation. It just gives you insights, right? So it's a great source of data, and indicating the state of the infrastructure, and also your external connectivity and all that kind of thing. So you can track things. So if you're having like customer experience or end user experience issues, then you can be more proactive. And then maybe some of it is around notifications, but some of it could be to bring up additional links, or to provide alternative routing, those types of things. So I think that that'll be an area to really focus on. The second bullet is interesting because if you're familiar with the Cisco product line, there's various products that kind of have, most of them kind of have their own controllers that indicates, very different APIs. And then those differences in APIs would translate to, different collections, right? So they're developing Ansible collections with their various modules. So, you might be a Cisco customer, but you're probably juggling a handful of different collections from Cisco, based off of the products that you have. And if you're automating through Ansible, then you have to kind of life cycle manage each one of those, because as they release new software and provide new APIs, and then put out new collections, then you need to update those and incorporate them into your work, your workflows that you're building to orchestrate, around these systems and stuff like that. So there's a lot of nuances there with this notion of this unified Cisco networking cloud. And again, a lot of this is kind of like the initial architecture, especially now that like I'm outside of Cisco, I'm just like looking at it, from the lens of like a customer, or a partner, right? Just trying to like wrap my head around, what they intend on doing. So what I got out of it, and just take this with a grain of salt because it's just like my, opinions from, all this stuff that they were releasing at Cisco Live. Through those announcements, what I got out of it was what they're doing is this is like a multi-year type of transformation to kind of move from all these, separate BUs with different products and different, front ends, which for us is like different northbound APIs that we have to deal with. And they're kind of bringing it into like this unified platform that has really two deployment models. It's either one that you connect to, in the cloud, like a Meraki, right? And then there's like the off-prem or I should say on-prem version. Yeah, so off-prem's the cloud, on-prem version like on-site. So in the on-prem delivery model, then that's kind of like what sort of is around like DNA Center, but that's really campus in Wi-Fi, right? And then you've got like Viptela for SD-WAN and ACI as a controller, for the data center switching fabrics and stuff. You have a handful of different controllers there, so it's like I think they're taking, or their intention is to take like the best of breed of like what works in Meraki and what works, sort of, in a more bifurcated way, across these other controllers, and make this like unified front end where it's kind of like a common GUI. And then some of these other GUIs can have a roadmap to kind of either roll into it entirely or like they would sit underneath of it, things like the Nexus dashboard and all this other stuff. So what that would buy you is, one part of it is a single sign-on. So the intention is to have like a single sign-on regardless if you're using this networking cloud on or off-prem. So a lot of that's from like Duo acquisition and some other stuff, where they can provide you, a common single sign-on across, either delivery option. And a lot of people would have both anyway because of like hybrid cloud. And then APIs. So instead of hitting like all these separate APIs, you would start to, point your automation tools or other, external software, to this like common set of APIs. So for me, and I know this is going to take like a long time, right? Because they're not talking about doing this right away. It's going to take, years to get all their APIs together. They would have like a common collection, right? So like when you're interacting with it from Ansible, it would be more streamlined in that regard, so less collections to have to deal with. And then it would be very similar regardless if it's Cisco stuff that's running and from a cloud managed kind of Meraki, or if it's more like the on-premise permutation of it. It would be very similar. So you wouldn't have a lot of nuances there anymore. So automation would be a lot cleaner, right? Because it's kind of the platform's been flattened in that regard. And then the user experience. So the UIs would be more similar because right now like all these GUIs are different. So it would give them kind of more of a common GUI, but like really like from an automation standpoint, we usually like to avoid the GUI anyway. But if we do have to use it, it would be nice to have it simplified. So user experience on the GUI is kind of a part of it. And as an automator, right, we usually want like great APIs so that we can have a collection and then we can avoid the GUI altogether. Just like with the Cisco automation controller, oftentimes I build that using playbooks and collections to build it as code. So it's a lot quicker, right? So with any of these solutions, it's great to be able to avoid death by 1,000 clicks and not have to deal so much with the GUI. So those are the two main things. There was obviously like just little, advancements here and there, from a product perspective. They talked a lot about like their AI capabilities and their collaboration tools, like for video conferencing and the like, right? So most of that was just advancements in like noise reduction and all that kind of stuff, or cameras that follow you around, and all that kind of stuff. But like the AI that caught my eyes was more around being able to hook into this platform, right? So if you have like a smarter automation and AI there, and then having more intelligence of what you can pull out of these systems, and less separate components to deal with, then that'll go a long way. So hopefully they're successful at unifying all this stuff. So we'll keep an eye on that over time. And just like our Red Hat Summit, Cisco has the on-demand library. So you can scan this QR code or use this link that'll be available afterwards, and have access to that. So I went in there, and just note that this is what I could find, but not all of the sessions have their recordings and their slides available yet. So this is just, this is not an exhaustive list. This is what I was able to have access to. So of course, like I saw the ThousandEyes session in there, and it does include Ansible. So there is, some, collection capabilities and stuff for Ansible. So this would be a good one to check out. It doesn't have EDA, but it's mainly like, configuring ThousandEyes, using Ansible. Another one was designing and implementing virtual secure firewalls on-prem and in public cloud. So this one does have Ansible included, and it has the recording and the slides and stuff. And then this one is for DNA Center as code. So it's using the Ansible collection for DNA Center. And then these two are from Red Hat. So there was 2 sessions from our BU that were breakout sessions, but unfortunately the recording's not ready yet, so you probably have to wait like another week. But you can go to these links, and it's kind of like a placeholder for right now. But right now the link will give you like details on what the session was about and that type of thing. But you'll see they'll add them over time. So the first one is for GitOps and NetOps. So it's like CI/CD pipeline types of things, using webhooks and stuff like that with the Ansible automation controller. And then this one was really cool. So this one is an EDA session for networking. So it was all around streaming telemetry. So it was doing different things than my demo. So like there was like one example of like your trending, like CPU is rising and stuff like that, and after it hits a certain threshold, it's going to create a ticket. So you can use EDA to automatically create tickets in ServiceNow or Remedy, that type of thing. So there was some cool operational types of scenarios like that where EDA is triggered, but it's like, over so many instances of whatever is happening, and it's hitting a threshold, and then ultimately it would provide a remediation through an action. So just keep an eye on these. And to have access to this, you just have to have like your Cisco login, and it's so you do have to have that, right? Like a normal Cisco login, and then you can have access to really all the Cisco Live stuff, not just this particular event. You can go back in time and go to like the one that they had in Amsterdam like 6 months ago, and like go further back, to the other events, and it'll bring up all those previous sessions. And just keep that in mind, because there's a lot of good stuff in Cisco Live sessions that people forget about. So that's all I had for the recap. So let me pause again and see if anyone has any questions. You can unmute, Joe, if you like, because really it's just us now. You don't have a mic? Oh, okay. Let me go over to the chat so I can see what you said. Oh yeah, I have a lot of ACI stuff. You could even ping me as a reminder, and I can share with you like some of my repos of ACI automation I've already done, and also there's a lot of stuff at Cisco and DevNet and things like that. So let me give you my email. If you just like run into stuff that you're trying to figure out, I can either answer it or get you pointed in the right direction. So I'm going to go ahead and kill this recording for this part. Manage recording.